welcome to meeting number 80, the House of Commons Standing Committee on the Government Operations and Estimates, also known as the Mighty Ogo, also commonly known as the only committee that matters. Now, pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Monday, October 17, 2022, the committee is meeting on the study of the ArriveCAN application. Just very quickly, as usual, colleagues, that keep your microphone away from the earpieces as it causes feedback and potential injury for our interpreters. Yes. And I'm sorry, I have to say, in accordance with our routine motion, I'm informing the committee that all witnesses appearing by video conference have completed the required connection tests in advance of the meeting. Now we welcome back Mr. Osowski, Ms. O'Gorman, and Mr. Doan. Welcome for the first time. We have opening statements from Ms. O'Gorman and Mr. Osowski. We'll start with you for 5 minutes, please. Ms. O'Gorman, I ask we are short on time if you stick to 5 minutes so I don't have to rudely interrupt you. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon. Last fall, I received a complaint from Bottler AI with respect to their experience at establishing a contract with the CBSA to provide a chat program that would assist employees to understand workplace harassment. The complaint outlined allegations relating to the potential procurement of a product by Bottler AI. I was not familiar with any of the engagements that had taken place with the company nor their product. I learned that the CBSA had done some pilot work of the Bottler AI product from February to December 2021, but that there was no ongoing relationship or contract with them. Given the nature of the allegations, specifically allegations of misconduct by officials at the CBSA in the context of procurement, I referred the matter to the agency's Professional Integrity Division, who, following their initial review and consultation with me, referred it to the RCMP. Should there be findings of criminality, I would expect the RCMP would pursue them. If there is found to be misconduct, the CBSA will take appropriate action. In January
2023, the Auditor General launched a performance audit of ArriveCAN. We have facilitated the Auditor General's work, and we will continue to do so. But let me assure you that I am not waiting for the outcomes of these processes to take action. It was clear that improvements were required with the procurement function at the agency. In fact, when I appeared before this committee in November 2022, I stated that we will continue to look at ways that we can be fair, open, and transparent in our procurements, and that we will try to provide the most responsive procurements possible.
I asked our internal auditors to launch an audit of contracting, and that work is still underway. I've increased managerial oversight over the procurement process. And employees with financial delegation and with contracting authorities at headquarters have been directed to retake procurement and financial management courses. I have given direction to rebalance our use of internal and external IT. The CBSA maintains more than 180 IT systems, critical systems that ensure movement of people and goods across the border. We are the second largest revenue collector in the government after the Canada Revenue Agency. Comme de nombreux systèmes critiques.
Like many critical systems across government, some of our systems are old. As such, we need to make sure that in decreasing our use of contractors, the CBSA does not open up a gap in the technical knowledge required to service these systems. Sound stewardship is critical to our success in modernizing the border service experience for our officers, for travelers, and for businesses.
We have and will continue to strengthen internal management of contracts at CBSA. I look forward to the results of our internal audit, and particularly the performance audit being conducted by the Auditor General. We will act on their recommendations. And needless to say, we will take all appropriate action relating to any founded allegations of wrongdoing. Merci.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you keeping that brief. Mr. Osowski for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to add some clarity to my testimony from December 8th, 2022, when I testified during the committee study of the ArriveCan app, as well as to respond to inferences made by the Globe and Mail article published on October 6, 2023. First, I retired on June 24th, 2022, and therefore, when I appeared last December, I did so as an individual without any access to my business records. I answered all questions truthfully and to the best of my recollection. When I answered Mr. Barrett's question on whether I had contact with Mr. Firth from GC Strategies in my role as president of CBSA, and I answered no, I did so because I had no recollection of ever meeting anyone from GC Strategies on ArriveCan or any other matter. Given this lack of recollection, it never occurred to me to verify this with the agency. It now appears that there was, in fact, one virtual Teams meeting on September 29th, 2020, that I attended to receive a demonstration from another company, Bottler AI, on a matter completely unrelated to ArriveCan that included a representative from GC Strategies. The agency has provided me the meeting records, and there were 12 people in attendance, including myself, as well as a representative from GC Strategies, identified simply as Christian@gcstrategies.ca. The agency has told me that this is the only meeting in my records that show a representative from GC Strategies attending a meeting with me, and I have no recollection of any other meeting in any form with a representative from GC Strategies. Mr. Chair, Mr. Curry's October 6, 2023 article conflates two separate issues, and despite having made it clear to him that I had not verified my testimony with the agency because I had, and still have, no recollection of ever meeting Mr. Firth, the article states my testimony should be called into question. Mr. Curry's rationale for this being that I failed to remember every individual who participated in a virtual meeting I had over 3 years ago. In hindsight, I should have verified this with the agency sooner and clarified this with the committee, and I apologize for any confusion this has caused. Finally, with respect to the allegations regarding Bottler AI, the agency has searched my records and told me that I was never briefed on any of the allegations made by Bottler AI before I retired on June 24, 2022, nor have I been contacted by anyone regarding any of these allegations. Mr. Chair, that concludes my statement. I would be happy to answer any questions.
Sorry, thanks for your opening statement. Before we start with Ms. Kusi for 6 minutes, I just want to extend a special welcome back to our analyst, Lindsay, who's for the longtime OGO folks who know she was with us for quite a while, went back, and now she's on the Senate side. But thanks for filling in today. It's wonderful to have you with us. Now, Ms. Kusi for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today. It actually seems to me the opening statements actually reflect a lightness of the matter. And this is, in fact, a very grave matter before the House of Commons and before Canadians. In fact, I would say that this is a matter of importance and probably which rivals any scandal in Canadian history. So this is not to be taken lightly. This is not something that can be overcome with performance objectives or evaluations or managerial criteria. We have to get to the bottom of what happened. Since the RCMP, of course, are currently investigating allegations of identity theft, forged resumes, contractual theft, fraudulent billing, price fixing, and collusion in the creation of this $54 million app. This is a big deal. And as I mentioned when I moved the motion to extend this study, in the beginning, this was an exercise and an attempt to find value for Canadians, which I remind everyone, some of the Liberals actually poo-pooed at, turned their noses at, said there was nothing here to see. And now we know that things are so much different. It is now a quest to get to the truth. So that's what we're going to attempt to do here today. And in addition to myself, you're going to have to face the prosecutor, Larry Brock, as well as my colleague, Garnet Jenna. So I'll start with my questions. Mr. Doan, what was your relationship to John Oswaski at CBSA?
He was my deputy minister and president.
All right. What was your relationship to Cam McDonald?
He reported to me.
All right. And what was your relationship to Mr. Firth?
I did not have a relationship with Mr. Firth.
Okay. Who made the decision to go with GC Strategies instead of Deloitte?
My team made that decision.
Okay. Were you involved in that decision yourself personally?
I was not personally involved in that decision.
Okay. So as CIO of the organization at the time, you mean to tell me that you were not fundamentally the individual who made the decision to go with GC Strategies instead of Deloitte. Who would you pin that one decision on?
That was made by my team, and I believe right now, with the current allegations that are underway, I do not know in terms of who I would identify that to, and that's part of the investigations that are currently underway.
Okay. So if we went through all of your communications, we would see that you had no communication with Mr. Firth.
I would not.
Okay. Was a minister ever involved in making this decision?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. Was the public safety minister at the time ever involved in making this decision?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. Did you receive a promotion immediately before Mr. Ozwoski left his role at CBSA?
No, it was well before he left.
Well before. How would you define well before?
At least 1 year.
How many years? Excuse me?
To the best of my memory, at least 1 year.
Okay. Did you go through this substantive process?
I was in the middle of a competitive process with Treasury Board.
Okay. Mr. Ozwoski, I appreciate you coming here and attempting to clarify your name. So, again, I will ask the question that was asked before of my colleague, Michael Barrett. Now that you have recollection, did you have any communication with GC Strategies?
I attended a meeting, as I described in my opening statement, with Bottler AI, and Mr. Firth was in attendance at that same meeting.
Did you have any communication with Mr. Firth personally?
Absolutely not.
Okay. Ms. O'Gorman, have you ever communicated with Mr. Firth?
I have not.
Okay. Have you ever communicated with GC Strategies?
I have not.
Okay. When did you first find out about this RCMP investigation?
Well, I referred it to the RCMP.
Okay.
Through
Why
my,
did you not refer it in 2021, or why was it not referred between the two of you in 2021? Whoever would like to ask when Bottler first came with their concerns.
There were no allegations raised to me before I retired in June 24th of 2022.
Mr. Doan, do you still communicate with Mr. McDonald? Okay. How would you describe the communication that you had? There's a communication which indicates that you were told, or it was communicated to Mr. McDonald to let Colin do his magic. Will you recall, or Mr. Firth or GC Strategies do their magic? Do you recall that communication?
I do not recall that communication.
Okay. Mr. Ozwoski, do you recall that communication?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yes, it was the communication where Mr. McDonald was asked to step aside and let Mr. Firth at GC Strategies do his magic.
I was not alive to any of that conversation in the background while I was getting the demonstration from Bottler.
Okay. Mr. Ozwoski, was that single meeting that you had on Teams, was that the only communication that you believe that you had with anyone related to GC Strategies?
The only other record that the agency provided me was an email from Bottler about their being selected to be on a G7 EU thing as a result of their work, and he was CC'd in that email. There was no other meeting that I attended with him, and I don't recollect him even being at this meeting.
All right. Mr. Ozwoski, do you still communicate with Mr. McDonald?
No.
Okay. What was the role of Mr. McDonald in obtaining the services of GC Strategies? How would you describe his role specifically? Mr. Doan?
Just a brief answer, please.
He was the Director General in charge of innovation.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Ms. Atwin for 6, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today. I'd like to echo the comments of Ms. Kuzi, just of the seriousness nature of the discussion today. And I was not here previously for the former discussion, and so I'm very much new to this, and I'd like to get to the bottom of it as well. So I'd also like to acknowledge that it's probably pretty tough on you as witnesses, and so just thank you for your honesty and for being here today and willing to answer our questions. So my first question, so we see that the Canada Border Services Agency, they oversaw most of the contracts with regards to the ArriveCAN app. But I'm also noting that some contracts for ArriveCAN began as early as 2017. Can you explain, perhaps Mr. Ozwoski, this timeline for me?
I think Mr. Dwan might be a better place to talk about that.
Sure.
To the best of my memory, the contracts were not for ArriveCAN. They were with different companies that would allow skills in terms of mobile application development and security that would eventually be used and leveraged to build the ArriveCAN app. But the need at the time obviously was not there because the COVID pandemic hadn't started yet.
Okay. And Mr. Osowski, now that you've spent about a year outside the government, what is your analysis of the usefulness of ArriveCAN and kind of your experience? Did it deliver what it was intended to deliver?
Absolutely. As I said in my testimony last December, at the time, and I'm going by memory here, so 100,000 people around the world had died, 30,000 infections in Canada recorded. The provincial health authorities were demanding better information on who was coming back to Canada, where they'd been, where they infected. All of this information had been collected on paper form by my officers and then handed over to the Public Health Agency, who were drowning in paper, and no one was getting the information they needed in a timely manner. So the Public Health Agency came to us, asked us to build a contact tracing app, and 70 versions of the app later, and millions of users of it, I think the app actually delivered.
Right. Well, how would you respond then to Bottler Inc.'s allegations of misconduct related to vendors contracted for ArriveCAN?
Well, I don't think that's what Bottler complained about. Bottler complained about their own contractual relationship, and I have no knowledge of that or any business relationships they had with these other firms.
Okay. Mr. Gorman, now that you're in this new role and kind of taking on some of the difficulties of the past, I'm curious if during their investigations, the Canada Border Services Agency or Royal Canadian Mounted Police, if they determine that there is wrongdoing on the part of its suppliers, what could be the possible consequences?
Well, I won't speak to the RCMP, but internally we have various forms of discipline that can be issued depending on the nature of the misconduct. So we have a committee that looks at allegations of misconduct, and if they are founded, then there's decisions around consequences to that.
Okay. For Mr. Doan, if true, would any allegations raised by Bottler breach of the Public Services and Procurement Canada Code of Conduct for employees or the Values and Ethics Code for the public sector?
I only know the allegations as I've read them in the Globe and Mail, but in terms of some of the allegations that are made would contradict some of the values and ethics for sure in terms of integrity and conflict of interest. But those are only allegations, and I don't know the state of the investigation.
Do these allegations, you feel, reveal any gaps in the above codes?
Again, in terms of the allegations, I've only recently found out about them, so I'm not quite in a position to comment on the state of the investigation or the outcomes of the investigation.
And I see a lot of the issue is with regards to subcontractors. So how could the contracting process be modified to provide the federal government more oversight on subcontractors?
The CBSA had worked very, very closely with PSPC and the guidelines that are set forth in terms of PSPC and what is acceptable in terms of subcontracting.
And Mr. Osowski, in an October 4th, 2023 Globe and Mail article, the Bottler founders explained that they alerted the Canada Border Services Agency to their concerns in September 2021, and you've alluded to that, the fact that you weren't aware of that. Can you give us any insight into how that might be, that there's a discrepancy there with what they're remembering versus what you're remembering?
No, there's no discrepancy. I believe that the article reported that they referred the matter to Mr. Utano at the time, and that matter was not brought to my attention.
Okay. How much time do I have left, Mr. Chair?
You have 1 minute.
Okay. So we noticed as well there's also conversation about perhaps advising how to best achieve a procurement process. So as far as GC technology, is it common practice for a federal official to advise a potential supplier how to pitch a product to the federal government? Mr. Doan, perhaps? Do you see that as a common practice?
So again, I've learned of those allegations most recently, and they are being investigated. In terms of conduct with any contractors, I do expect any of my executives to follow the code of conduct and the rules and disciplines around values and ethics.
That's all for me, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Vignola for 6, please.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Ms. O'Gorman, Mr. Osowski, Mr. Doan, thank you for being here today. It's difficult to read what we read in the Globe and Mail in October, but it's important to ask questions about what happened and what we can do. Ms. O'Gorman, in your introduction, you mentioned that you facilitated the work of the Auditor General. Can you tell us how you did that?
On a travaillé étroitement avec les...
We worked closely with the Auditor General's team to provide the documents that they requested during the entire process. The internal team of the Auditor General did not mention any comments from the Auditor General about not having received certain communications or documents. So I would say it was similar to all of the interactions that we have when there are audits. We worked on a report recently. Both were done at the same time, and I would say that we worked in the same way for both studies. Thank you. According to the Globe and Mail, the CBSA received warnings about, let's call them questionable relationships between IT consultants and federal public servants. What form did these warnings take? Were they verbal? Were they written? They were documents that were sent to me from Bottler AI in October 2022. Thank you. And can you send those documents to the committee? These documents belong to Bottler AI, and I understand that they will testify on Thursday, so I suggest that you ask Bottler AI as the documents belong to them. It would be more appropriate for them to share them. Thank you. Usually in contracting, we go through PSPC that has its own management system. Why is it that this time the usual process did not apply? Because it says that contracts go back to 2017. I wasn't there during that time. Mr. Osowski?
Were put in place for the work with Bottler.
OK. Puis le fait que ArriveCan...
And the fact that ArriveCan came to be without using the usual process, is that normal, do you think?
Well, what I can say is that, and this is a very broad sort of understanding here, is that when something urgent happens and you have contracting vehicles in place, you do task authorizations to find resources that can fill your urgent needs. And I believe that that's in fact what was done in the early days. So you have these contract facilities. They take advantage of them. If they need more help, then they have other avenues that they can work with Public Services and Procurement Canada to find additional resources to help. But perhaps Mr. Dwan has some more to add on that.
Oui, au tout début de la pandémie.
At the very beginning of the pandemic, there was an urgent need. And so we had a sole source contract very quickly in order to act rapidly. But as you said, you're right, normally it follows these processes. And the fact that you used a sole source contract, do you think that that is what opened the door to what's happening right now and to the allegations that mean that the RCMP has to investigate? The use of sole source is a tool that can be used in certain circumstances. Is the use of the sole source contract the reason behind these allegations? I couldn't comment on that. We studied C290 rather. Can you tell us what Why is it that no public servant, not a single one, raised this issue? We had to wait for someone outside of the public service to raise the problem. What explains that?
Je dirais, je suis pas en mesure de répondre à cette maintenant.
I would say that I'm not able to answer that question today, but it is the reason why I sent the file to our professional integrity director to ask for an investigation, and we both sent the file on to the RCMP. Is it possible that...
Councillor Six, please.
I think Amir Morveh and Ritika Dutt are heroes. The courage that they have to step forward in a situation like this. They didn't get paid for 9 months. They have reputable damage potentially from this. The challenges of potentially not getting contracts with the federal government and others. Would you agree, Mr. Zwolski, that that this is a courageous thing that they've done, and that they've been harmed with waiting for 9 months, getting paid, no contract, the stress of this?
I appreciate the concerns that you raise. I certainly have seen the one part of the story that's been reported in the Globe and Mail, and I think that I would look forward to seeing the results of the investigation to sort of comment further.
Well, given what you've read, do you also believe that there's reputable damage to Canada in terms of, trying to seek vendors that are going to be highly discouraged in terms of wanting to do business with Canada, given this situation and how this played out?
Again, I can only make statements based on what I've read in the Globe and Mail, and that's just part of the story, and I wait to see what the RCMP investigation produces.
Well, you had a comment about the Globe and Mail about Bill Curry, and you said it was confuted. I would say this is really important. Do you believe this needs a deep dive, given the information we've gotten so far?
Absolutely. And I personally am here today because the way that the article was written impugns my reputation.
Yeah. I appreciate that. And it's not targeted at you and at your reputation, to be honest with you. I just wanted to seek your opinion back, given the information that we provided. So I appreciate that. Ms. O'Gorman, on September 27th, 2021, Bottler informed the CBSA to immediately stop payments to the contractors and request a refund of any amounts already paid. What did CBSA do in response to this?
I wasn't in the position in September 2021, so I'm not in a position to speak to that.
So you have no information about what was done there?
I have launched an internal investigation and referred it to the RCMP.
Okay.
But I am not personally
I think that would be good
conducting-
information for this committee to have from the CBSA and produced to the committee. I don't think we can understand fully what happened here without that information. Mr. Chair, can I get consent from the committee to request that information?
Colleagues? I assume we
you.
have agreement. Thank you very much.
Is GC Strategies named on the Bottler task authorization?
I have not gone through the documents. When Bottler sent me, when the individuals who work for Bottler sent me the dossier with the allegations, I handed those over for an investigation. So I have not personally been going through documents. I have asked that there be an independent internal investigation, and I referred the matter to the RCMP.
Okay, I think we need both that information and also to find out if the CBSA suggested the payments for the task authorization should flow through Cordax or to GC Strategies. And then finally on to Bottler. We need that information. Can I also request that through the committee?
Colleagues, I'm going to just stop time here for a second. Are you clear what Mr. Johns is asking for, Ms. O'Gorman?
Yes.
The documents?
And I just note that it is part of an internal investigation, and I don't know what documents exist. I have not personally been going through. I've wanted that to be
If you
independent
could
of me.
provide what Mr. Johns and the committee has asked for, and also provide us, if anything is not available, to provide us with that information and why it's not available. Thanks very much. Go ahead, Mr. Johns.
And the reasoning I'm asking for this is, funneling taxpayers' dollars through a party not even listed on a contract is of serious concern. How much did the CBSA grant in additional contracts to GC Strategies, Cordax, Dalian after the report on September 27th, 2021?
I don't have that information. I would just concur with your point about the seriousness of it and point out that I referred it to the RCMP.
Okay, have you ever spoken with the public safety or any other minister with respect to Bottler's allegations?
After I referred it to the RCMP, I informed the Minister of Public Safety that I had done so.
When did you do that?
December 2022.
Okay. Has the CBSA ever consulted legal services with respect to Bottler's allegations?
We have not consulted legal services. I've not sought legal services input. There's an independent investigation from the Professional Integrity Director and an RCMP investigation.
Okay.
Excuse me, and I referred it to the RCMP. I don't want to characterize what and how the RCMP is handling it.
Mr. Doan, the 2021 report from Bottler was raised to you after it was reported to Antonio Utano, who reported it. Did he directly report that to you, that report?
Based on my memory, that was not raised to my attention.
So it was brought to him, and he did not bring that to your attention, the report?
Not to my memory.
Okay. How many projects with GC Strategies as either a contractor or subcontractor were approved under your term as CIO at the CBSA?
I can endeavor to get you that information. I've not been working with the CBSA since April, but I'll work with CBSA colleagues to get you a fulsome answer.
Thank you for that. Appreciate that. And what is the total of, can you also supply the total of the above contracts as well?
I will work with colleagues to get that information.
Did you apply to your current position at TBS, or were you suggested for the role?
I was contacted by the current Government of Canada Chief Information Officer, who I'd worked with previously in my previous role at CBSA, and offered the opportunity.
Thank you.
Time still.
Oh, great.
We got about 25 seconds.
Okay. So I will go back to Mr. Oswalski. You weren't aware of Bottler's September 2021 misconduct report to the CBSA. I just want to clarify.
Absolutely not.
Okay. Have you ever received any marketing material with GC Strategies logo on it? Anything like
Marketing material?
that? Yeah, just, with their logo on the...
I have
in the
no
emails.
recollection of.
Okay. And since taking over as managing director... Okay, thanks. Thank you.
Mr. Brock, for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. A question to both Ms. O'Gorman and Mr. Osowski. There are two basic principles when witnesses appear at parliamentary committee. Although you're not sworn to tell the truth, there's an expectation that all witnesses that appear tell the truth and give fulsome answers. Yet both of you testified before committee on December the 8th, 2022, and made zero reference to the RCMP investigating this matter, correct?
So
yes or no, is that correct?
it's not a yes or no.
Ms. O'Gorman, did you advise committee on December the 8th, 2022 that the RCMP was investigating? Yes or no?
We were in discussions
Yes
and
or no, Ms.
passing
O'Gorman?
information to the RCMP
Ms. O'Gorman,
through
yes or no?
December and
I'll
January
take that as a no.
on the
Mr.
Bottler
Osowski.
AI.
Point of order,
Question
Mr.
to
Chair.
you, sir.
Mr. Chair,
please.
if my colleague could just permit the witness to answer the question
Yeah, that is...
for the benefit of all of us.
Yeah, I appreciate that is not a point of order. We do have, it is the member's time, and we would ask that our witnesses answer questions.
Mr.
Please go ahead.
Osowski, on December the 8th, 2022, you did not volunteer that the agency and the contracts that were awarded by the agency and the consultants were under RCMP investigation. Yes or no?
I was not aware of any allegations.
Okay. Now, you also were asked not less than on 5 occasions about your knowledge of GC Strategies, and in particular the owner or the president of GC Strategies, Mr. Firth. And on each of those 5 occasions, you denied knowledge. Today, you're telling us, whoops, I remember, yes, there was communications, and yes, I was part of a meeting. So why should we believe you now, sir, when you deliberately withheld that information when you were asked on 5 occasions about your knowledge of Mr. Firth and GC Strategies?
Mr. Chair, I did not deliberately deny anything. I was made aware of this when Mr. Curry actually reached out to me on LinkedIn to say he was working on a story about this. I told Mr. Curry that I had not verified any of my testimony with the agency. I did not have any access to my business records, and to the best of my recollection, I answered truthfully that I had no recollection.
Thank
and
you,
quite
Mr.
frankly, I
Osowski.
still have no recollection of meeting
Mr.
Mr. Firth.
Osowski, you were asked very early on in your meeting by my colleague, Mr. Michael Barrett. Question: in your time as president of the agency, did you have contact with Kristen Firth of GC Strategies in that role as president? Now knowing that you had a Zoom call meeting with Mr. Firth of GC as well as the principals of Bottler. So you said on record, sir, over a year ago, no, that was wrong. That was a misleading statement to committee, correct?
I had no intention of making any misleading
I don't care
statement.
what your intention, sir. Is that your response at the time? No.
If you were here for my opening remarks, you would have heard that in hindsight, I should have verified my testimony, and I apologize for any confusion that it has created.
Now, I want to know why you, as the president of a very significantly large government agency, was not notified by your insubordinates, one of them being Antonio Utano, about an allegation of not only wrongdoing, but potential criminality involving identity theft, fraudulent resumes, forgery, fraudulent billing, collusion, impersonation. How is it, sir, that you as a president would not be notified of a potential criminal investigation? Surely that complaint went to your legal department. Are you saying that there is no chain of command, that situations like this, as serious as it is, does not get reported to the president?
I have no recollection, and the agency has told me this matter was not brought to my attention during my tenure as president.
It's rather convenient, though, that you did, as an agency, report this to the RCMP when the proverbial you-know-what hit the fan, when everyone was talking about this $54 million price tag. So I guess you appreciate, with the little time that I have left, you can truly appreciate, given the lack of clarity from you and Ms. O'Gorman, why the RCMP is investigating this matter. You appreciate that now, don't you?
I understand the significance of the allegations, and if it had been raised to me, then I would have done the same thing as Ms. O'Gorman. I would have done an investigation, and if need so, I would have referred it to the RCMP. But it was not.
Thank you very much. Mr. Jouari, for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was part of the initial study, and at no times during those testimonies we heard that there was any involvement of RCMP. So this comes as a not only a surprise but a little bit of a shock, and the extent of it is mind-boggling. I'm going to start with Mr. Wolski. You are familiar with the article that everybody is referring to. Bill Curry, you referred to it as well, published on October 4th and updated on October 6th. And I'm going to quote something, a statement that's been made in there. The allegations stem from, and this is a quote, the allegation stems from a relatively small contract valued at less than $500,000, but the money flowed from a larger $2.2 million contract for a general service that was also used by the agency to fund outsourcing work related to ArriveCAN app. So if my recollection is correct, the application initial pilot cost less than $100,000, and then I recall we had 70 modification, and it was done, and the total cost after the testing and all of those things was about $9 million. So can you shed light into how a contract valued at less than $500,000 gets flown into a $2.2 million contract, and that $2.2 $21.2 million contract is part of a larger outsourced project?
But I was not involved in any of the contracting options that were used for ArriveCan.
So who would be, sir?
Well, probably Mr. Dwan had officials that were working on it, and those were the ones that were looking at, do we have the staff internally to do this? Do we need to bring in someone? Is there a contract vehicle in place? Do any of these firms have the talent that we need? It's a decision that's delegated down into the organization.
Mr. Dwan, is there anything you want to add? Because I understand the concept. I was in management consulting. We had open contract, which we provided services. And I assume as part of that open contract, when the urgency kind of came up, portion of that contract was used to develop this app or further develop this app. But what is the process for then getting these authorizations?
I was not aware of the specific vehicle contract that was used for the bottler engagement to which you speak.
Who would have been there, sir? Then who would have been?
That would have been done by my team.
So if there is a contract less than $500,000, you don't get involved. But when there is a use of a $21.2 million contract, you still don't get involved?
My managers and senior executives are subdelegated. In terms of the subdelegation and what they
What's your authorization limit as far as what contracts above you look at from a dollar value?
In terms of what is engaged, it's not only a question of dollar value, it's a question of risk. So in terms of dollar amounts and risk, they are, and I count on them.
So I'll be my apologies for interrupting, but I'll be very hard to believe that the application was supposed to save the life of millions of people coming in is not considered as a high risk. I honestly cannot understand why after all of this time we still don't have an answer. Madam O'Gorman, I'm going to spend the rest of my time asking you, can you talk about what is the difference on the escalation process in 2021 when it was brought to the then president about the misconduct, and the fact that this time on the second round was brought directly to you and you acted on it? Where is the mess?
I can't speak to what happened in 2021 and to whom the allegations were raised. So I received an email from one of the partners of Bottler AI indicating that she had information relating to misconduct in the CBSA.
Mr. Ozowski, my apology. Did you receive a direct communication from Bottler in 2021?
I did not, and the agency verified my records that I did not.
Okay, is this...
That's our time, I'm afraid.
Okay, no worries.
Ms. Vignola for 2.5, please.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to come back to my previous question about the fact that no public servant disclosed the information. Is it possible that within the CBSA there's a kind of code of silence or a fear of reprisals if ever someone dared to speak out against a decision or a move that someone higher up might have made? Is that a possibility? That is not the case. In my role, I focus on strong management, on accountability, and especially at the level of managers, and we have processes and systems to help them. As I mentioned, when I learned that there had been problems with contracting processes at the agency, I took several steps that I already mentioned. Is it possible that there is someone in an agency with 15,000 employees that has a different point of view? Possibly. But as In my role, I make my expectations clear that we act in accordance with the policies and internal systems, as well as those of the Treasury Board. Thank you. A point of clarification. Does the RCMP investigate misconduct of 3 businesses involved with ArriveCan, or are they investigating ArriveCan specifically? I can't speak about the RCMP. I think that they received some information. What my director of integrity sent was the communications that I received in the fall of 2022. Are these allegations against 3 businesses or against ArriveCan? It is in the context of their contracts with the agency.
2.5, please.
Mr. Doan, you cited that you didn't believe that Anthony Utano shared the September 2021 report with you. If he didn't, you're his direct superior. Is that correct? During this period?
Yes, I was.
That's even worse because it sounds like he received the complaint, but he was also the technical authority listed, for the Dorian contract, Dalian contract, which paid for the Bottler contract. Can you speak about how this happened and how you feel about not being informed about it, if that's the case?
I would go back to, I do expect all of my managers and certainly senior executives to conduct themselves with following the values and ethics and code of conduct, especially around anything that has contracting. I do rely on them to raise to my attention anything that needs my engagement or intervention.
Ms. O'Gorman, has Bottler been paid, in full? Is there any outstanding invoices? And also, are you aware of any allegations of wrongdoing against, your department from other contractors, especially since this has been brought to light outside of Bottler?
It is my understanding that the individuals at Bottler AI have been paid. I am not aware of any other allegations. That being said, I did ask for an audit of contracting, and I did refer these to the RCMP and to a professional integrity investigation, and I assume that both of those processes will follow the threads of any material that come up in the course of those investigations.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Ozowski, since you left as the CBSA president, you've gone over to PricewaterhouseCoopers. You've heard me complain about the outsourcing growing and, went from $29 million in 2011 to $93 million in 2021. Since you've taken over as managing director at PricewaterhouseCoopers, can you talk about how much new business has been closed with PricewaterhouseCoopers and the Government of Canada?
Mr. Chair, respectfully, I'm here to respond to the concerns raised about my testimony last year and nothing to do with PricewaterhouseCoopers.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mr. Johns. Mr. Jennings, for 5 minutes, please.
Thanks, Chair. Ms. Gorman, how long have you worked for the Government of Canada?
Perhaps 23 years.
Okay, in 23 years, how many times have you referred files to the RCMP?
I don't recall ever referring a file to the RCMP.
Okay, thank you. This scandal is fairly simple for the public to understand. You've got 2 people who run a company with 0 other employees. They get hired by the government. They do no IT work. They subcontract the work, and they get a big cut for themselves, over $11 million on ArriveCan alone. The government chose, for some reason, to hire these 2 middlemen who did no IT work to then hire someone else, and they got over $11 million in the process. And so it's frustrating to hear, you're talking a lot about processes and procedures and how do we tighten the screws on all the processes. But doesn't that miss the core point that this one obviously really stinks? And why didn't government officials, why did they think it was a good idea to give over $11 million to these 2 these two guys who did no IT work in exchange for their subcontracting services. So to really get at the nub of the issue, Ms. Gorman, why do you think they were hired?
I wasn't in the agency when they were hired. My understanding is that they had a standing offer that had been competed and established through public services and procurement, and whether I'm using the proper term, a standing offer or a supply arrangement for staff enhancements that the CBSA and other departments would use.
Okay, let me jump in though. So these guys had a great thing going then. Clearly, like if Stephanie and I said, "Hey, we got an idea. We're gonna open a firm in our garage, and we're gonna get hired by the government to do work, which we're then going to pass on to someone else, and we're going to take 15 or 30% of it." What stops any two Canadians from doing that?
I'm seized with the contracting function in CBSA, and I have outlined how I'm addressing it.
But
The questions that you raised
let's take a step back and
relate
understand
to
how this can
other
happen.
departments who might be better placed to respond to that.
Okay, but clearly these two guys weren't just any two people. Clearly they had access to someone or something that allowed them to get paid by the government to do nothing. Is that not a reasonable inference? Mr. Doan, do you have a comment on this?
Who made the decision?
Those are allegations that have only come to light, to my knowledge, recently.
But it just doesn't make
comment on.
sense, right? Would you agree that it just doesn't make sense?
What doesn't make sense? My apologies.
Well, the fact that two people were paid over $11 million to do no work and subcontract.
The CBSA worked very closely with PSPC and all the rules governed by PSPC on all of these engagements.
Yeah, but this is sort of process mumbo jumbo. Like I think people would want to know. They got paid to do nothing. Why were they hired?
I believe.
Who made the decision? Let me just ask that. Who made the decision?
I believe, as my colleague at CBSA has said, that this is currently under investigation.
So you don't know who made the decision?
Not to my knowledge.
Oh, okay, so none of you know who made the decision to hire these two guys, according to your testimony?
I can say, based on memory, that my team made the decision.
Well, who?
Who made the final decision? Who sent the email?
At this time, to my knowledge, I do not know, and it's part of the investigation that's currently underway.
Okay, so two guys got over $11 million from the government of Canada to do no work, and none of you know who made the decision to give them that contract, but you're currently investigating. I'm glad the RCMP and not just you are investigating. Mr. Chair, I would like to have a look at the emails that were sent or received from these witnesses that use the words Firth Anthony or GC Strategies from March 2020 to present. Can the department provide those within 30 days? Is the committee agreed to ask for those documents within 30 days?
Without knowing the volume and the required translation,
Well,
I don't
it
think we
seems
could
like the
commit to a
committee's agreed,
timeline,
so-
but we will endeavor to respond to that.
And
Sorry,
finally,
I'm going to interrupt. That is a committee motion, so will be required 30 days, please.
thank you. And I'd also like
15 seconds.
Thank you. And I'd also like to request the calendars of these three witnesses from March 2020 to present. Will the committee agree to request that information within 30 days?
Yes.
So be it.
Okay. Thank you. And I think that's...
We'll finish up with Mr. Baines for 5 minutes. Before I forget, witnesses, besides the 30-day one that was just mentioned by Mr. Genuis, OGO has passed a motion that any other documents asked for, like Mr. Johns, are required to be back within 3 weeks of today. Thanks very much. Mr. Baines for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think we can all agree that so far what we've heard is pretty concerning. And I want to go back to Mr. Doan. You mentioned earlier that it's your team. Like, who's on the team? How many people are on this team?
At the time when I was in that position, I had approximately 1,400 employees.
So 1,400 employees are making this decision?
Many of
the
these
contract?
Many of these decisions are not reside with one single individual, and many people are consulted in it. I had 6, to my knowledge, 6 director generals that were reporting directly to me as well.
6 director generals. So would they sort of be in the know? Would they be the people that would know what's going on? You would assume.
Each director general had their own area of accountability. So in some cases, it would fall under 1 or 2 director generals. In some cases, it would be more, and more people would be consulted as part of our governance process.
So maybe to Ms. Gorman, like, have those names been submitted to the RCMP, the team that's all included here? Is that all part of this investigation?
So the RCMP is undertaking its own investigation, and I have no visibility, nor do I expect that I should have any visibility into the documents that they may or may not need. We will furnish them anything they want to see. Similarly, while I've been kept apprised of our professional integrity investigation from a process perspective, I acknowledge the allegations are significant, and I have had updates in terms of the process. I am not aware, and I have not looked at the documents that they are looking at because it is an independent process. So I am anxious for it to conclude. I understand that there are there is a back and forth with the RCMP, who of course will have.
Okay, and just on your internal audit, then, is there any updates on the finding or the process that you're going through right now internally?
So in terms of our internal, there's communication with the RCMP in terms of the ability to do interviews, and there's a deference to the RCMP. There were allegations of audio recordings, and our team was working with the RCMP in terms of the most appropriate way to obtain those audio recordings. I don't know if we have obtained them. And further, there were significant amounts of material that the investigators were going through. And like I said, I've had updates in terms of the process, but not in terms of the detailed pages that they are looking at.
Okay, I'll go back to Mr. Doan. Considering what we've heard so far, how could the contracting process be modified to provide the federal government more oversight on subcontractors?
I think based on the outcomes of the investigation and the allegations, many of the appropriate authorities, including colleagues at PSPC, should be engaged to review if there's a change or an update required in the subcontracting process. It is a fairly common process in both private and public sector, but I will wait to hear the outcomes of the investigation.
So you leading this team, you right from the outset, you're not thinking that you have any recommendations on what you can do differently right from the outset right now?
Based on the allegations at this time, I do not know what the changes that would be required are until the investigations are complete and the findings are shared.
But you didn't know who made the decision. So what trade-offs would be required to achieve the outcome?
As Ms. O'Gorman mentioned, some of the contracting training that's been done or continues to be done for CBSA to remind them of their duties and accountabilities. In terms of awareness, my managers and senior executives are subdelegated to make certain decisions, and I do expect them to abide by the code of conduct and values and ethics. And I also expect them to raise anything that requires my attention, regardless of authorities.
Okay, Mr. Chair, any more time? Okay, thank you. That's all the questions I actually have right now. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Mr. Baines. Witnesses, thanks for being with us. Again, just a reminder, the items that Mr. Johns and others asked for, it's 3 weeks maximum, unless otherwise noted by Mr. Generous, which was 30 days from today. Colleagues, we're going to suspend to allow our witnesses to leave, new witnesses come on in for sound checks. We are suspended. Back in. Welcome back. Mr. Conacher, welcome back. A longtime friend of this committee. Will you be doing an opening statement, Mr. Conacher? And you're on mute. There we go.
Yes, I will.
Wonderful. We'll start with a 5-minute opening statement from yourself and then 5 minutes from Mr. Terrazzano. Please go ahead, Mr. Conacher.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to members of the committee for this opportunity to talk on this important situation and the issues surrounding it today. And I will be making a submission to the committee, written submission, just to follow up on these remarks today and your questions that I welcome. I wanted to just start by actually referring the committee to the June 2021 report by your colleagues on the Standing Committee on Access to Information, Privacy and Ethics, entitled Questions of Conflict of Interest and Lobbying in Relation to Pandemic Spending. This report, filed with the House in June 2021, almost 2.5 years ago. The recommendations have not been acted on it, that are in it, and the government continues to delay taking these effective actions to prevent conflicts of interest and secret unethical lobbying in spending decisions. Secret and unethical lobbying, excessive government secrecy, as well as unethical big money influence and unethical decision-making and spending are all legal in federal politics. There's huge loopholes in several key laws that allow for all of these things to be legal. As well, the enforcement is so weak that Canadians are more likely to get caught parking their car illegally anywhere in Canada than politicians and government employees are likely to get caught violating key ethics and spending rules. As well, the penalties for illegal parking are higher than the penalties for serious ethics and spending violations by federal politicians and top government officials and government employees. The system is the scandal. It's not surprising that it encourages dishonest, unethical, secretive, and wasteful actions. And this dangerously undemocratic and corrupt system must finally be cleaned up by closing all the loopholes, increasing transparency, making the ethics rules, enforcement, and penalties much stronger, and specifically focus on this situation, the fact that you can actually legally lobby in secret with no record is one loophole that has to be closed. And the way to do it is reverse the onus and have all government employees, officials, politicians, and their staff, everyone involved in politics, if someone communicates with you in respect of your decisions, then you register it. That's the way to close all the loopholes and have all communications registered. Those communications should be up on a registry. The Access to Information Act should require a duty to document all actions and decisions and also proactively disclose it. That will end excessive government secrecy. And finally, as you have studied extensively, whistleblower protection needs to be extended to everyone in Canada, not just government employees, and so that suppliers can blow the whistle and be protected from retaliation by the system that the Integrity Commissioner runs. Of course, that system needs to be strengthened very much, as you've examined and reviewed, and hopefully Bill C-290 will end up making some of those key changes. But if not, it's just another area that needs to be addressed. I'll leave it at that, and I welcome your questions. And again, just refer you very much to, I think you should review in your deliberations on recommendations to prevent another ArriveCAN situation from happening. Review again the June 2021 report of the Access to Information, Privacy and Ethics Committee that was aimed at addressing questions of conflict of interest in lobbying in relation to pandemic spending.
Thanks, Mr. Conacher. Mr. Terrazzano for 5, please.
I'm Franco Terrazzano. I'm with the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, and I'm here on behalf of hundreds of thousands of Canadians who demand answers for the $54 million ArriveCAN scandal. Why does everything always cost taxpayers more? Who is going to be held accountable? And why is everything as clear as mud? It cost $80,000 to launch the app in 2020. Then in July 2022, Canadians were told the cost jumped to about $26 million. A couple months later, Canadians were told the costs jumped again to $54 million. Then independent techies said the cost of building the app should be around $250,000. $250,000. Can you see why taxpayers are mad? Every time we turn around, we are told ArriveCAN costs more. So who is going to be held accountable? If I told my boss I was going to do something for $10,000 and the actual bill was $100,000, I'd have to polish off my resume. Taxpayers are out $54 million because of the ArriveCAN app. Which bureaucrat is out of a job? Which bureaucrat is even out of a bonus? Every year, about 90% of government executives get a bonus. What happened at the Canada Border Service Agency, the Public Health Agency, and Public Services and Procurement Canada? Well, we're going to break some news right here at the committee because we're going to talk about some documents we just got back from an Access to Information request. In these 3 government departments involved in ArriveCAN, total compensation paid out to executives increased by $40 million between 2019 and 2022, a 31% increase. The average compensation for these government executives went from $193,000 to $204,000. The Prime Minister himself said the procurement process for the ArriveCAN app seems highly illogical and inefficient. So will this committee recommend taking bonuses away for executives overseeing the ArriveCAN debacle? Or is the message for next time, don't worry, you can blow through $54 million and keep your bonus because there is no accountability? The Prime Minister's 2021 mandate letter on public services and procurement said it's supposed to be open and transparent. But taxpayers have been left in the dark ever since the beginning, whether that's the actual cost for ArriveCAN or the details of who is actually working on the app. The Canadian Taxpayers Federation filed ATIP requests on all manners of ArriveCAN records more than a year ago. As of October 2023, the CBSA has blown through 6 deadlines with no explanation. And the records we did get back are riddled with redactions, including hundreds of pages, including redactions. So will this committee make recommendations to improve transparency? You don't even have to come up with the recommendations yourself. Just copy the Information Commissioner's recommendations. Require transparency for all agencies or companies the government outsources programs to. Stop abusing exemptions to deliberately keep information from Canadians. And for brownie points, implement a sunshine list like the vast majority of provinces. So let's put this into perspective. Imagine going to a mechanic. They tell you the bill for a simple fix is $80. Then they tell you the bill is $2,600. Then you get the final bill back, and it's $5,400, and the invoice is blacked out. You'd be outraged. But this is how taxpayers were treated with the ArriveCan app. And we demand accountability. The question for committee members now is, who is going to be held accountable for the ArriveCan scandal? Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. We'll start with Mr. Genuis for 5, or, Ms. Cusi for 6, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much to our witnesses for being here today. Mr. Conacher, why do you think it is that the president of the Treasury Board announced last week that after the report coming out of Ethics Committee that she was not prepared to make any changes to the ATIP process? Why do you think that is?
Well, I don't understand it. It certainly doesn't comply with any democratic good government principles that have been established at the international level. It also breaks the Liberal government's promises in terms of open government that were made back in 2015, continues to break them, I should say. The government is focused on and claiming that open data, making some information more proactively available online, is the same thing as open government. But open government is the public's right to access information the government wants to hide. Open data is just making the information the government wants to disclose more available. They're not the same thing, and this government has a record of excessive secrecy, as the Information Commissioner has documented, and has broken all of its open government promises except a couple of them.
Yeah, thank you for that. I believe in her press conference, she indicated that she will not be looking at the matter until 2025, when conveniently that is expected to be the year of the next election. My next question for you, Mr. Conacher, would be, do you consider GC strategists to be lobbyists? They've been presented in this scenario as vendors, but in your opinion, could they be perceived as lobbyists, or would you consider them lobbyists?
Just to say, in terms of all the changes that I recommended generally, I would hope opposition party leaders will, as with Bill C-290, join together and introduce bills to strengthen the Access to Information Act, the Lobbying Act, the Conflict of Interest Act, and other democratic government measures. Like Bill C-290, the opposition parties have a majority in the House and should be passing these bills and daring the Liberals and the Senate to vote against them. In terms of GC strategies, first of all, there's not supposed to be any lobbying during procurement processes. You can ask questions of the government institution that is contracting out, and then the answers will go to all the bidders. So that is a registry of who asked the question, what the answer was, and that's all that's allowed. Otherwise, you're lobbying. You are communicating in respect of decisions, and the big, huge loophole in that the Lobbying Act, unfortunately, is that if you are not paid for the lobbying, you do not have to register. So if you have a contract that says, I'm just providing strategic advice to you, and you're paying me for the advice, any lobbying I do for you is free, then you cannot be prosecuted under the Lobbying Act because you have not been paid for lobbying. It's a loophole that has to be changed, along with several other loopholes, to ensure that all lobbying is disclosed and secret lobbying is illegal. And that's one of the big problem areas in this and many other policymaking processes, that secret lobbying, also if the Lobbying Act doesn't apply to you, you can unethically lobby. So you can provide gifts and assistance to people that you are trying to get government decisions from, because you're not covered by the Lobbying Act and therefore not covered by the Lobbyist Code. Until these loopholes are closed, as I said, the system is the scandal. Expect more scandals because the system encourages them.
Thank you. Mr. Terrazzano, in a Globe and Mail article published on August 2nd of this year, you stated that we want the government to really go a step further and ensure that maximum transparency is built into the contracts and negotiating process, so businesses know up front that if they are going to take taxpayers' money, then they're going to be required to be transparent with the public. Do you agree that subcontractors should be included in ATIP requests?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, especially with this, when we're now talking to have a total bill of $54 million for a simple app. How do we know it's a simple app? Because two independent techies were able to build it or recreate it over 2 days. So I think taxpayers have every reason to be scratching our heads right now, wondering who is going to be held accountable for this $54 million scandal. And I think one of the reasons why all of this happened is a lack of transparency.
Do you think that government departments should be aware of any subcontracting relationships that stem from the federal funding of private suppliers?
Yeah, sure. I absolutely think there needs to be more information.
How would you recommend that the federal government increase its oversight into subcontractors without undue administrative burden and to ensure that the federal government is not overpaying for its services?
Okay, a couple. So number one, the Information Commissioner on the Government of Canada's review published in January 2021 makes a great recommendation for this. Recommendation number 2 is essentially that agencies that are getting these outsourced contracts be subject to the access to information. Right now, one of the access to information requests we got back, tons of redactions, and the government is essentially using Section 16 and Section 19 to withhold information that the public deserves.
And in your opinion, what's the impact on Canada's economy when contracts are given to private suppliers to then subcontract this work rather than focusing on in-house solutions?
I'm afraid that is our time, but maybe you can answer that in writing to
Thank
the
you, Chair.
committee.
Thank you.
Mr.
Witnesses.
Sousa, you're up for 6, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being here. Certainly, we are all concerned about ensuring that there's proper discipline, transparency, and integrity in the process of procurement. And I know as a government, at all levels, frankly, we take that very seriously. We want to ensure that everyone abides by the rules and that we concur with the outcomes. So I appreciate you being here and looking for those answers and transparencies. Mr. Terrazzano, I'm also interested, do you sit on the board of the Taxpayers Federation?
No, I do not.
So you're not one of the volunteer directors?
I am a federal director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. For more information on the structure of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, head over to taxpayer.com. You can take a look at our website, and while you're there, we've got a bunch of great petitions to sign. A popular one right now is Scrap the Carbon Tax.
How many directors are on the board?
Once again, if you want more
I went on, it
information about
doesn't say.
Look,
It didn't tell me how many board members there are.
Already we spent a minute talking about the Canadian Taxpayers
Why don't you want to answer
Federation.
that question?
So let me just say, with respect to the member, if you want all of the information about the Canadian taxpayers, an overview of our financial statements, head over to taxpayer.com. And I will just add, if you just spent half of the time worrying about the people who fund your pay, as you are right now questioning me about the CTF, all taxpayers would be better off.
Actually, I'm just trying to assess the level of representation because the Taxpayers Federation, you do create a great voice. But I'm just trying to understand the consequence. Like, you can't tell me how many board members there are? How many directors are on the board?
We have 235,000
How many
Canadian
board
supporters.
members?
In 2021 and 2022, the CTF raised $5 million on the strength of more than 45,000 donations. The average donation is around $110. So
Yeah.
I am here on behalf of hundreds of thousands of Canadians who want answers for a $54 million
It's my time, Mr. Chair. So I understand from your response, though, Atlas Network, state
So we
policy
do
for
not
the United
take, we do
States
not
are also
take any
major
funding.
donors,
We do
and
not
they're
take
U.S.
any
donors,
funding
not just
from
Canadians.
international sources.
So
Only
if I could
Canadian
ask the
tax-
next
only
question,
Canadian.
if I may.
Sorry, let me interrupt. Please let Mr. Sousa finish, and then I'll give
Mr.
you...
Franco, Terrazzano, you're very, very concerned about this. I'm not trying to accuse anybody of anything. I'm just trying to assess the level of the nonpartisan activity of the Taxpayers Federation. And I know that many elected politicians have sat on the Taxpayers Federation, like Jason Kenney and Mike Harris and Rob Ford and a number of other great Canadians who have represented a strong partisan level of reform and Conservative Party, and that's okay. I just wanted to be clear as to the public and those here in the committee to understand that level of nonpartisan and the level of integrity by which going forward. I'm just trying to sense the level of funding that is received by the United States of America to your federation, the level of or the lack of transparency in terms of your board and how they're elected, because they're not elected by your members. They're not elected by the very people that you've made mention. By the bylaws, I understand, you're just electing yourselves within that board, and you're not being very clear. So I'm going to proceed with my next question as to the analysis of the ArriveCAN. I mean, just out of curiosity, have you spoken to law enforcement in regards to the ArriveCAN issue?
So we do not take a cent outside of Canada.
Have you?
Okay? We have
have you spoken to any?
235,000 Canadian supporters. Okay, and we're here because hundreds of thousands of Canadians are demanding answers to the $54 million ArriveCAN scandal.
I'm with you on that. I'm with you on that. Have you seen
that the cost of this was supposed to be $250,000?
We have a point of order. Sorry to interrupt. Mr. Jouari?
Can you kindly ask the witness to answer the question? Thank you.
It's not as much.
On the same point of order.
Go ahead, Mr. Generous.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The Liberals are clearly more interested in holding private organizations accountable than they are in being accountable themselves. I wish they were as interested in answering questions about their own behavior than they were in asking questions to private citizens and private organizations.
It's a statement. Yeah.
Colleagues, let people finish the point of orders and let me rule on them before you already start criticizing me. Is this a point of order, Mr. Johns?
Yes, it is.
Can you make it pretty brief so I can
do want Mr. Terrazano. I want to hear from
him,
actually, and he's brought forward some really good, important feedback back to this committee. But I ran a Chamber of Commerce. I can remember years ago how many people sat on my board. And I've never forget any board how many people sit on my board. I think this is a reasonable question. He's a witness testifying to the committee. He should answer the question.
Yeah.
It's under oath.
None of these, let me judge. I will be honest, I don't believe any of these are valid points of order. I would just ask Mr. Sousa to ask the questions and not overtalk Mr. Terrazano. Mr. Terrazano is free to answer as opaquely as ministers do, as deputy ministers do, and other ministers. And Mr. Sousa is welcome to be as pointed as perhaps the chair was in past life, sitting on and asking the questions. Can we proceed because we're running short of time?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll proceed with Mr. Conacher.
You have a minute 4 left, please.
If I can go with Mr. Conacher. The Auditor General is in the midst, as you know, of completing this audit of ArriveCAN, the applications. Do you have confidence in her ability to complete the audit, Mr. Conacher?
I do generally. I would prefer the appointment process for all of Canada's democratic good government watchdogs and the good government watchdogs across the country to be more nonpartisan, to be a independent commission coming up with a short list of qualified candidates and then sending it to an all-party committee to make the final choice rather than having it in the hands of the ruling party. But the fact that she has a fixed term of office does help secure her independence and help secure
I'm sensitive to time.
Political interference.
In regards to the RCMP who's currently undergoing the investigation regarding the ArriveCAN, do you trust the RCMP in completing its investigation?
I have the same concerns with regard to the appointment process of the commissioner. It was done by the ruling party cabinet. It should not be that way. It should be a nonpartisan process because the RCMP and all the other watchdogs are enforcing key laws that apply mostly to cabinet and should not be chosen by cabinet. I also have serious questions about the RCMP based on what we have discovered through access to information requests concerning the investigation of the SNC-Lavalin affair. And the fact that we're still waiting for 2,200 pages of documents that the RCMP is still hiding a year and a half after we requested them.
That is our time.
Okay,
Madame Vignola for 6th place.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Terrazano, Mr. Kochner, I have the same question for both of you. Some of our witnesses during previous discussions on ArriveCan suggested that in the long term, it would be smarter for the government to invest in public servants who are specialized in IT and should also provide training. Do you think that that kind of strategy would help us optimize the resources in place in the federal government? And if not, how do you think we should optimize the resources that are currently available? Thank you. Mr. Terzano first, please.
Pas de problème. Si d'engager de nouvelles...
If hiring people and or training those who are already in the public servant in IT, if that is not the right solution, then first of all, why not? And second, what should we do that would really be a good solution that would be a good deal for consumers from whom I receive frequent emails? Thank you.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate the question. So, for starters, it's hard to believe that we couldn't find, of the additional 98,000 government employees that have been hired since 2015, that we couldn't tap 2 of them to be able to figure out who in Canada can actually build and do the IT work on an app. So it's hard to believe, as the in-house costs of the government have increased by about 40% additional bureaucrats since 2015, that we couldn't tap them to figure out who to actually build and maintain the app. And the second question, as it relates to recommendations, well, number one, we're really looking for accountability moving forward. Which government employee is going to be held accountable for this? Who's going to lose their bonus? Who's going to be out of a job? And also, too, we got to improve transparency measures. We talked about the Information Commissioner's recommendations to make sure the agencies who are getting these outsourced contracts are fully transparent with taxpayers, to make sure that government institutions can't use different sections of the Act, specifically Section 19 and Section 16, to withhold information from taxpayers. And as I mentioned, as a brownie point, I do believe that we should also implement a sunshine list like the vast majority of Canadian provinces.
Merci. Monsieur
You have
Conacher?
3 minutes.
Monsieur Conacher?
Mr. Conacher?
Yes. Pardon-moi, je vais...
I will answer in English, but I do have to practice my French a lot.
The situation, I think, is that I was interviewed now almost 20 years ago by a CBC reporter about a past IT, information technology scandal. And I said, it's not surprising at all. You have middle-level executives who don't know computers very well trying to make huge computer purchases. And of course, they're going to choose wrong. We need to have a system put in place of people in-house in the public service who know what they're doing. And then if you want to have people like GC Strategies, well, then you just pay them as advisors. They should not be getting 20 to 30% commissions for finding subcontractors. Just pay them as advisors for a contracting process to do a due diligence as to whether the company's bidding have competence. And they would be paid not $11 million to give that advice. So it's just a capacity issue. It's existed for 20 years. I think if you looked at any big business, you would find the same thing, that for a long period of time, you had middle executives who had no expertise in computers and technology, making huge technology purchases and screwing up and wasting a bunch of money most of the time.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Earlier on, I asked officials a question about something that really surprises me, which is that no public servant at any level revealed that something intriguing was occurring with these ArriveCan contracts. I would like to know if you have a hypothesis about this. What explains that nobody internally spoke up? I will start with Mr. Kochner and then Mr. Terrazzano.
We only have 35 seconds, so brief, please.
Thank you. Well, you know well the gaps in whistleblower protection. So you're always sticking your neck out if you blow the whistle in the public service, and people outside the public service can't blow the whistle. I think that really is what explains it. And it is controversial, but I think there should be a duty to report. If you do have witness wrongdoing or something that seems to be wrong, you should have to report it to the Integrity Commissioner. I know that's a controversial recommendation, but I believe in it.
Time. Mr. Johns for 6, please.
Okay. We're obviously moving C-290 through the House right now around whistleblowing, and subcontractors aren't included. Mr. Terrazzano, do you think that that needs to be fixed? Clearly, that we need to be able to provide an outlet, because this company, Bottler, took a lot of risk. They came out, I think they're heroes, really, you know, for stepping out and taking, because they're going to be potentially penalized by the government. Can you speak to that? The importance of fixing
So
this?
I haven't reviewed that specific piece of legislation, but I think if you can encourage the most amount of transparency as possible around the procurement, as much whistleblower protections as possible, I think that is a good step in the right direction to encourage the transparency.
How do you feel about, like, you see government officials working in really high-level roles, and politicians too? They leave the government and they go and work for big, huge outsourcing companies. Do you have a problem with the optics with that?
Well, no, I think the problem comes into place when there aren't guardrails on the government side, and when there is a lack of transparency, and when you have government agencies and institutions bending the rules when it comes to transparency requirements. And we've seen that firsthand just with the ATIPs that we got back in this, where we literally have about 300 pages that contain redactions. And I think taxpayers deserve that information. And Mr. Johns, just to throw a kudos to you, I've seen some of your comments in the media about it's wrong to keep Canadian taxpayers in the dark. Yeah. And I think that's what happened right from the beginning of this process.
Thanks. Mr. Conacher, Bottler has shared with the Globe and Mail firsthand accounts and physical evidence show a pretty cozy relationship between Mr. Firth and government officials. When a government contractor refers to public officials as his personal friends and urges prospective contractors to single out a public official for praise, when a public official is offering live coaching to prospective contractors as they pitch their product, does that show a typical relationship between a democratic government and private contractors, or does it seem like an improper one, and does it raise any red flags in your experience?
It raises a lot of red flags, violations of the lobbyist code, and I believe these people are lobbyists. The lobbyist code does not allow you to lobby someone, which means communicate in respect of their decisions when you have a relationship with them, of friendship that causes the appearance of a conflict of interest. And then on the government side, the executive testifying earlier said that he expected all of his team to follow the values and ethics code for the public service. Problem is, it's just an expectation. My father had an old saying, people do what you inspect, not what you expect. And there is non-inspection. People can go, it's all an honor system, and honor systems don't work. They work for most people who are honorable, but whatever percentage it is that are not, you need inspection, auditing systems, you need full disclosure of their values, their assets and liabilities, and their conflicts of interest before any decision-making process begins, with a watchdog that is auditing and inspecting regularly so everyone knows you have a high chance of getting caught. Otherwise, as I said, the system's the scandal and you're going to get scandalous behavior.
Can you talk about what the consequences would be for violating lobbying rules, and what the cost would be?
The consequences for violating the Lobbying Act are high, but the RCMP over the last 20 years has just shown they won't enforce it. They just bumped 5 cases back to of 11 that have been referred by the lobbying commissioner back to the commissioner, and the commissioner dropped all 5. And there's been like 3 prosecutions since 1988. it's a joke. They just don't take it seriously. The lobbyist code, the consequence is a report in Parliament that you violated the lobbyist code. That's not going to discourage anyone. There's several lobbyists who have been found guilty of violating the lobbyist code who were promoted and got more contracts as lobbyists.
So
obviously, because they send a message to the marketplace that they'll lobby unethically if it gets you what you want, and people want that.
But lobbying, how much money would you make on a contract like this? I mean, they're making $11 million in this current model. What would they make as a lobbyist on average?
Well, I don't know the averages because it's not required to be disclosed. You don't have to disclose, unlike in the U.S., how much you are spending on lobbying efforts as an organization or how much you're paying consultant lobbyists. Should be part of what's disclosed. It's one of the loopholes in the Lobbying Act. But the penalties, you could go to jail. But as I said, the RCMP has let 9 out of 10 lobbyists off the hook. So what's the incentive to comply? And if you don't have an incentive to comply, you won't see compliance.
Okay. As a committee, we've seen how difficult or even impossible it is to trace the government spending when it's hidden in layers of subcontracting. Can you talk about what problems this raises? And obviously, the NDP would like to see this done in-house, or at least for the middle person to be cut out of the equation. But if the government is going to continue to contract and subcontract out, do you have any recommendations for how that can be documented in a way that does allow transparency and accountability?
Yeah, I'm going to pitch off Mr. Conacher. Sorry, we only have about 40 seconds, so please be brief or just offer to send in a response. But please go ahead.
As I mentioned, increase in-house capacity and then have advisors who you don't have to pay $11 million and then just contract to those who are bidding without subcontracting. And the Access to Information Act has to apply to everyone who receives the contract. You can't be hiding subcontractors' names under the so-called Access to Information Act.
Thank you, both of you. Mr. Brock, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To you, Mr. Terrazzano, I want to thank you for all the work, all the good work, important work that you're doing at the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Your vigilance in terms of ensuring that taxpayers receive value from this government is admirable. I just wish the government would take a page from the good work that you do. Primarily, my questions are to you, Mr. Conacher. I appreciate your legal background. Did you ever practice criminal law?
No, actually, I never practiced law. I was a non-practicing member of the bar for 10 years, and then haven't practiced.
I want you to hearken back to first-year law school and criminal law. I'm sure you took first-year law, basic principles of mens rea and actus reus. So I know that you were successful, sir, through an ATIP of receiving some 1,815 pages of RCMP records with respect to, quote unquote, their assessment as opposed to investigation. We now know that there are well over 2,000 pages that have yet to be released to you. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's accurate.
And quite frankly, sir, with my legal background over 30 years, I have prosecuted multiple homicides that actually had less disclosure than obstruction of justice. All criminal code offenses are serious. This one in particular is very serious. It's a hybrid offense. And if convicted by indictment, that individual would go to prison. So I appreciate the seriousness by which you conducted yourself, sir, on behalf of Canadians. Now, there have been certain details that have been released in the press with respect to some of the information that was learned by you and others with respect to this information, these records. It's abundantly clear that for close to 4 years that the RCMP, who claims in a newspaper report that they conducted the most thorough and comprehensive and fair assessment of all the evidence, only interviewed 3 people. Are you aware of that, sir?
Yes, that's what the records show.
And the reason I'm asking these questions, sir, is because the NDP Liberal Coalition actually shut down an ethics committee yesterday to prevent the RCMP commissioner from testifying on very important details as to how they legally concluded that they lacked the reasonable and probable grounds to arrest Justin Trudeau for obstruction of justice. So I want to hearken back to your legal career, Mr. Conacher, and think about the evidence that Canadians did hear, that we as parliamentarians heard, but more importantly, the evidence the RCMP heard. The evidence the RCMP heard was the direct testimony of our former first ever Indigenous Attorney General, Jody Wilson-Raybould, who kept incredible detailed notes and also recorded conversations. So I want you to factor that in, and also factor in our former ethics commissioner, Mr. Dion, who concluded that the Prime Minister, with the support of friends and other members of Cabinet and the Prime Minister's office, conducted a series of overt, direct acts attempting to influence the decision of Jody Wilson-Raybould. And you know, sir, that under the Criminal Code, under Section 139, the actual obstruction need not take place, that you could be found guilty just with an attempt. Is that fair?
Yes, attempt is covered.
Right. So do you find it rather curious that the RCMP, after 4 years interviewing a sum total of 3 individuals, that the ethics commissioner actually quadrupled, I think they interviewed 16 to 17 witnesses, collapsed the House of Cards and claimed that there was no corrupt intent on behalf of the Prime Minister? Were you aware of that phrase that the RCMP used?
Yes, that's in the records.
Agree with me, sir, that a corrupt intent is not an essential ingredient to the mens rea requirement under Section 139. In fact, all you need to prove is it criminalizes deliberate acts which seek to obstruct, interfere, or hinder the pursuit of justice. And in this case, the pursuit of justice is Jody Wilson-Raybould had the courage to say, no, Mr. Prime Minister, you are not going to influence me, and I'm not going to give a remediation agreement to a corporate entity in Quebec that has some serious criminal charges. So you can understand and appreciate why
Mr. Brock,
you can understand and appreciate why we wanted to hear from the Commissioner. Would you agree?
Yes.
Thank you.
That is our time. Mr. Kuzmierczuk, please, for 5.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And question to Mr. Conacher. There's 2 companies that are sort of at the heart of the allegations, and that's 2 companies called Dalian and Cordix. And the allegations of fraud state that they had submitted in their bids inflated experience or inflated information that would then allow them, for example, to get increased per diems or actually qualify for the contract. Mr. Conacher, is this something that happens with regularity in these types of processes? And I ask that because, again, this is a very, very serious issue. This goes to the heart of the issue of trust in our procurement process. And so I very much appreciate you being here to answer our questions.
I don't know how regularly that occurs. It is one of the most difficult parts of this situation, I think, which is how much due diligence has to be done within government and before a contract is handed out. The problem with subcontracting is that it exponentially increases the due diligence burden on the government officials. And that's why I think that you should do everything should be changed to eliminate these middle people and just have companies who are actually doing the work bidding on the contract without all of these complicated subcontracting schemes, because they are schemes and they're going to hide something as a result and likely result in some violations of the rules that would not be possible if it was a direct contract with a direct bidder.
I appreciate that very much, and I mentioned trust, and again, this issue has been caught. It is being studied right now and investigated. Should Canadians trust the investigation? You already spoke about trusting the Auditor General in her work. Can we trust the RCMP process to get to the bottom of this, in your opinion, from what you've seen in the past?
As I mentioned with the SNC-Lavalin situation, there's so many questions that have been raised, so much excessive secrecy and silence from the RCMP over 4 years. We essentially forced disclosure and forced them to make a public statement about the situation after 4 years, it shouldn't be allowed by any rule. And so, no, I have very serious questions about the RCMP. The executive mentioned there's an internal investigation going on and that it's independent. No internal investigation is independent. It's just not. An independent investigation is made in someone who's actually independent, is not in the pay hierarchy or the power hierarchy of an organization. And so that's why we have the Democratic Government watchdogs, but they're all chosen by the ruling party with very little consultation or input from the opposition parties. And it shouldn't be that way as well. All of these things need to change. The rules need to be strengthened, enforcement and penalties, or the system's a scandal and you're going to see scandalous behavior continue.
Thank you. A question for Mr. Terrazzano. Obviously, if the RCMP does find evidence of wrongdoing in this particular case, and what are some of the consequences? Should we expand the scope? I look at the facts. The two companies, again, at the center of this concern is Coretex and Dalian. Now, they've had contracts with the Conservative government that date back all the way to 2013. They received $22.8 million from the Harper government. 2014, $26.6 million Harper government. 2015, to $27.6 million Harper government, for a total of $75 million. If there is wrongdoing that's been found by these two companies, Coretex and Dalian, do you think that we should expand? Do you think the RCMP Auditor General should expand that investigation to reach back in time to look at those contracts? Well, thank you for the question. I'll leave the specifics when it comes to the legal issues with the RCMP and the Auditor General report. We'll leave with the Auditor General until we see the report. What I'm really hoping for this committee is to look forward and how to put in the guardrails to make sure that this doesn't happen again, where we get a simple app for $54 million hit to taxpayers. And I think the best two ways to do that is to ensure accountability, right? Taxpayers are out $54 million because of the ArriveCan app. Which bureaucrat or bureaucrats are going to be out of a job? Which bureaucrat or bureaucrats are going to be out of a bonus? Because I think we can't just have the incentive as we look down the road, no matter which party's in power, whether it's the Conservatives, the Liberals, the NDP, or the Bloc, whatever party's in power, we can't have the incentive to be, hey, you know, you can get away with all this type of waste and it doesn't matter because you'll get a bonus.
That is our time. Ms. Vinola for 2.5, please.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Terrazzano, in January 2023, you published an article in which you expressed your skepticism about the possibility of an internal examination of ArriveCan at the Government of Canada. And your skepticism was especially about the fact that even if there was a review, nothing much would change. What could lead to a real change aside from removing the bonuses? And of course, I completely agree with you that there should be a list, a checklist before people can get their bonuses. But what would make an internal review truly meaningful, and what would make it so that there's true accountability? And if you are going to speak about a sunshine list, can you explain exactly what you mean by that for those who are listening?
Is just to disclose the compensation of the top earners in government and to see how that trend is increasing year over year. As I mentioned, the vast majority of provincial governments implement a sunshine list for Transparency 101 for taxpayers, and I think that is a good transparent movement for all Canadians at the federal level. And so what would make an internal study as good as possible from this committee? You mentioned the bonuses. I mentioned the bonuses earlier. I do think the committee needs to identify which government employees were responsible for the wrongdoing, where we go from $80,000 to $26 million to $54 million. Who was responsible? And then above that, why weren't other government employees, especially those at the top, why weren't they saying anything when it was $80,000, $800,000, $8 million cost, $18 million cost, and so on? Beyond that, I really do believe an immediate step to improve transparency is to just take the recommendations from the Information Commissioner published on January 2021, specifically recommendation number 2 and 4 with respect to agencies who get these types of contracts to be subject to the Access to Information Act, and then recommendation 4 being that government employees or institutions can't skirt the Access to Information requests with Sections 19 when it doesn't apply.
Thanks, Mr. Terrazzano. Thanks, Ms. Manola. Mr. Johns, over to you. But before you start, please, we need, if you could read into the record the or the information you requested earlier, just so we have it properly on the record. I won't take away your time, but go ahead, please.
Thank you. There's 6 questions I asked, and so sorry, please be patient. The first question was on September 27th, 2021. Bottler informed the CBSA to immediately stop payments to the contractors and request a refund of any amounts already paid. And the question was, what did CBSA do in response? We didn't get an answer. We asked for that to be tabled. The other one is GC Strategies named on the Bottler task authorization, and they didn't answer. Did the CBSA suggest that payments for this task authorization should flow through Cordax to GC Strategies and then finally on to Bottler? Next one is, how much did the CBSA grant in additional contracts to GC Strategies, Cordax, and Dalian after the report on September 27th, 2021? And lastly, has the CBSA, no, it's not the last one, has the CBSA ever consulted legal services with respect to Bottler's allegations? And you couldn't answer. To Mr. Doan, so those are all to Ms. O'Gorman to report back to the House within 30 days. To Mr. Doan, how many projects with GC Strategies as either a contractor or subcontractor were approved during your term as CIO of the CBSA? And what is the total value of those contracts?
Thanks. Please go ahead with your 2.5, Mr. Johns. Sorry.
And 30 days too for Mr. Doan, yes.
Thanks. Go ahead with your 2.5, please.
Thank you. So, Mr. Conacher, thanks to Ms. Dutt and Mr. Morv, we also have access to an email they received from Mr. Firth of GC Strategies. It's absolutely outrageous. Mr. Firth tells them, quote, Cordax Dalian was brought in as a pass-through, and they demanded 15%. And your cost plus 15% for me and 20% for Cordax, et cetera, it rose to close to $500,000, end quote. He describes how CBSA was, quote, pissed at the resulting price increase, and he says he wasn't going to tell Bottler about the Dalian middleman at all. He thought he could leave them, quote, none the wiser, end quote. Personally, I cannot be convinced that Dalian was necessary to facilitate this work when the party doing the work didn't even know they existed. On top of that, Mr. Firth is so confident that he can get Bottler additional government contracts that he appears to offer to waive his fee for this contract and recover it from future ones. This is all public information. He says he's willing to remove himself from the deal. He asks if Bottler wants him to recover from Cordax or let it slide and look out to the next one and recover. He meant a possible future contract with CRA. So my question is, if Mr. Firth is indeed suggesting that Bottler pay him for his work on this project out of a future contract, would that be an example of contract performance fraud? And what other concerns does this raise for you, Mr. Conacher?
Yes, and the other concern it raises is essentially saying it's a contingency fee payment. Future contracts that I will get from you, you'll pay me then a slice of that contract for essentially as a success fee, and that is illegal under the Lobbying Act. So that's the other concern that it raises.
In terms of like your overall response to this, when you see it, what are your thoughts in terms of what needs to change to never allow this to happen again?
Well, again, increasing the capacity of the public service internally, but also increasing the accountability of the public service. If people internally are going to be handing out these contracts as opposed to using these middlemen who are really lobbyists, the ones who are getting the contracts and subcontracting. They're really acting as lobbyists who have built these relationships and then are the gateway
Mr.
for all sorts of
Conacher, I
other
apologize.
companies.
We have to cut you off there because we're down to our last few minutes. But again, maybe you could provide in writing the rest of your answer. We are going to go, we just have a tiny bit more time. We're going to go for 2.5 minutes with Mr. Genuis and then 2.5 Mr. Kuzmirchuk. Please go ahead, sir.
Wow. Okay. A follow-up on our request for information first. It was referred to that 6 DGs worked for Mr. Doan. I would like to request the names of those individuals as well as emails sent or received from them using the words Firth, Anthony, or GC Strategies from March 2020 to the present, and I'd like them from the department within 30 days. Is there agreement from the committee for that request?
Yep. Fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Terrazzano, thank you for your work. I wonder if Mr. D'Souza or Mr. Souza is being tough on you because he's smarting from your recent revelation about NCC spending $8 million replacing a barn. I have farmers in my riding, and I think many of them could build a barn for less than $8 million. Do you want to speak ever so briefly to that revelation?
Yeah, I mean, $8 million on a barn. The National Capital Commission and Rideau Hall teamed up to soak taxpayers for a whole bunch of waste. But look, I think the real issue here with the ArriveCan app is the fact that it originally launched for $80,000, and then at the end of the day, we somehow end up with a total of $54 million hit to the taxpayer. And I think all Canadians who are worried about this scandal are now left scratching their head, wondering who is going to be held accountable. And if no one is going to be held accountable for this within the government, then what's stopping this type of waste from happening again?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I mean, I think fundamentally we need to replace this Liberal NDP government with a government that cares about spending and values taxpayers' money. Mr. Chair, I am very concerned about the testimony we received in the previous hour. The gaps in the testimony previously shared with the committee, and as such, I would like to move the following motion. That the committee report to the House this motion of censure expressing strong disapproval of testimony given by Aaron O'Gorman on November 14th, 2022, and John Osowski on December 8th, 2022. In an apparent breach of the committee's privileges, Mr. Osowski definitively and inaccurately denied any contact with Christian Firth, and Ms. O'Gorman failed to share information at the committee about an RCMP investigation, despite knowing about the investigation at the time. Chair, I think it's important for us to report to the House these concerns that we have regarding the testimony that was received, because committees need accurate information from witnesses in order to do their jobs. And in the one case, the committee received information that apparently was inadvertently inaccurate, but I checked the record from December 8th, and Mr. Osowski was quite definitive. He didn't say "not to my knowledge." With respect to contact with Mr. Firth, he said a definitive no. And I think the committee might be inclined to view the issue more charitably if he had simply said, it's possible, I don't recall, but he was very definitive in his denial at that time. And I think the evidence suggests that Ms. O'Gorman, although as far as I can tell, was not directly asked about an RCMP investigation, she should have been forthcoming about that information. And for committees to do their work, they need clear, forthcoming, and accurate testimony. And when there are areas that witnesses are not aware of, they should at least acknowledge those things. And we continue to be looking for information about who made this decision, who was responsible for this decision, and that information continues to be withheld. So I want to put that motion forward. Thank you.
I'm going to assume you do not have that in French to circulate.
Chair, I'm moving it as the matter at hand, and I'm moving it verbally. I have been putting it together in the course of the discussions here, so I did send it to the clerk maybe 10 minutes ago, but I assume the translation process isn't complete yet.
Yeah, no, I'm just asking because I'm hearing requests to have it distributed, so I just wanted to double check before I say it's not available to distribute. Can you colleagues, just give me 15 seconds, please? Colleagues, just quickly, I'm going to, if everyone's fine, we're going to dismiss our witnesses because there's a couple other things I have to discuss before we continue with that. So, Mr. Conacher, thank you again for joining us. Thank you always for your advocacy for whistleblowers. I appreciate it.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Tarzano, and we are out of time, and I have to get to other things which will make sense, trust me. Mr. Thorpe, thanks for showing up, but I'm going to just dismiss. We also are at a point where we have to grant our interpreters at least an hour break at this point. So I'm going to suggest we suspend just for a couple more seconds so we can excuse our translators, and let me just chat with on
Mr. Chair,
options.
move to adjourn.
Okay. We have a motion to adjourn.
Point of order, Chair. Chair, I put this motion on the floor highlighting significant concerns we have about testimony. The government wants to adjourn that discussion right away, clearly. I'm not sure if the government even properly had the floor when they moved that motion, and you do have to have the floor to move a motion. And again, the government is looking for ways to shut down the conversation of this issue clearly, and that's obviously very disappointing, but not at all surprising that they're moving to shut down the discussion right now. But they do have to do so within the rules, and I don't believe that member had the floor.
Colleagues, we require to take an hour break as soon as possible. So I am going to suspend the meeting for an hour. I'm sorry, we have to suspend as soon as possible. I prefer not, no. Real brief, Mr. Johns.
Can we just come up with an agreement to bring this back Thursday? I think it's worth the conversation. That's all I'm working for, because I think a lot of us have commitments here tonight. Like, I'm supposed to be in the House myself, so I hope we can come to terms with an agreement to bring this back Thursday and have a full conversation.
Okay.
But just we have the Bottler witnesses for 2 hours on Thursday.
Hey, colleagues,
so.
I'm gonna suspend because we have to suspend. I will discuss this separately, but we are suspended.
est prêt à lever la réunion. Monsieur Genuis? Bon, ce que je comprends, c'est que nous allons maintenir notre horaire de 2 heures complètes avec les témoins et on va mettre de côté du temps pour gérer cette motion après avoir écouté les témoins. Oui, un peu de temps additionnel, à peu près 15 minutes.
And then Mr. Johns, very, very brief, because again, we're losing resources. Ms. Vinola?
Je n'avais pas la traduction pendant une partie de ce que Monsieur.
I didn't have translation when Mr. Jennis was speaking. I want to make sure that I understood correctly that we will keep the 2 hours allotted to our witnesses, and then afterwards we will take the necessary time to discuss the motion that we will have received in both official language on Thursday. Thank you.
Are we in agreement then? Colleagues, I would just ask that perhaps different parties might want to get together in the next couple of days and just also iron out the motion. And if we are in agreement, we are adjourned. Colleagues, thank you very much. Thank you.